for the invitation. I'm going to speak, I think, very, very fast because I'm going to try and put 6 years of experience into 20 minutes, which is going to be difficult. First of all, not everybody here will have been to Folkestone, so just a very brief introduction. 46,000 inhabitants, south coast, 22 miles from France. A town that has seen a lot of history, and really you can read the town like a book. You can read its history through its architecture. So in the west of the town, you have these amazing buildings like this one of several grand hotels that were built in the heyday of Folkestone when it was a very desirable tourist resort. Also, Martello Towers. There are 5 Martello Towers in Folkestone alone, which gives you a sense of how much it is a frontier town, a border town, very sensitive to potential attacks. Then, as you get further east, there's the harbour now, once a buoyant harbour full of a very strong fishing industry, a ferry that used to run from there, but everything has been in decline really ever since the 70s, when tourism left Folkestone, when the fishing industry declined. So you have a lot of empty streets around the harbour, a pretty dysfunctional harbour. Also there was strong coal mining once in Kent, that was in decline too. And all of that, oh sorry, I'm going the wrong way. And all of that has resulted in very high unemployment, a lot of boarded up shops that we also saw obviously in Liverpool, and it's a familiar sight in many towns. But what makes it different to try and set up an exhibition in a town like Folkestone, in comparison, for example, to Liverpool, or also Ingrid's talk yesterday obviously in London, is that there is no cultural infrastructure in Folkestone. There's no museum, there's no gallery. So you really start from a kind of tabula rasa, and all of that has to be taken into account for the artist, but also for the curator, when you devise a project. And what we decided to do is, in a way, the opposite of what Margate decided to do, which is to have a major capital project, a beautiful new gallery. We decided to have a collection without walls, if you want. So the triennial is an exercise for artists to delve into the history of the town, to make works that are very specific to the site and to the stories that are embedded in Folkestone. And some of the works will remain in the town and other works are temporary. So it's an unusual mixture. So with each triennial, the first one we managed to keep 8 works, and for 2011 we again will have 8 works. So the collection is ever growing and accumulating. The starting point for the first triennial for me was H.G. Wells, who's one of many people who lived in Folkestone for a long time, many famous people. And the title became one of the works of H.G. Wells' Tales of Time and Space. You see here something, this is one of hundreds of photos literally I have from site visits. This is a very particular site visit. It's the first site visit on the 9th of May 2006, and there's Mark Wallinger, Niels Norman, Kay White, my lovely assistant Neve Sullivan, and also one of the many experts the artist met. This was a very inspirational flora and fauna expert. And this is absolutely key for the artists to develop their ideas, these site visits. And often the artists came many, many times, stayed for several weeks there to develop eventually their projects. And this is another key thing for the triennial, is the artists have almost 2 years to work on the project. So it's a very generous period of time. I have selected 5 works from each year, and the first one is, if you think back to the first slide, which was one of the grand hotels, the Metropole. Of course, neither of them are grand hotels anymore, or hotels of any shape and form. They're just private apartments now. And this is a work by David Batchelor in the space of the Metropole Hotel that was once used as a ballroom in Edwardian times. And it's one of the temporary works, but it also shows you one thing that was very important for us, that these commissions and this involvement with the town has led artists to go beyond their comfort zone and also beyond what they normally do in many cases. So this is David Batchelor's first kinetic work. These spheres are made out of cheap sunglasses, as you find them in so many seaside towns. They're put together in clusters and hung from the ceiling. And in the metal grids to which they're attached are hidden small disco ball motors, which generate the rotation of these balls. So they were really, the work is called Disco Mécanique, after Fernand Léger's Ballet Mécanique, and of course refers to the Edwardian couples who used to have their thé dansant in that very space. The space had been used as a temporary gallery. It was full of walls and clutter, all of which we removed. So it was really a reanimation of that space. Mark Dion, who I'm sure is familiar to many of you here, and his project, the Mobile Gull Appreciation Unit. And it's typical for Mark Dion and for his way of working, because at first it seems quite light-hearted and comical, but it actually belies a more serious scientific endeavor behind it, because Mark was struck by the many seagulls in Folkestone, and obviously very familiar to every seaside town. And, but in Folkestone in particular, they are very much hated, and people talk of them as the rats of the sky. So he started to work on a kind of, it was almost an evangelical mission to persuade people that seagulls are actually much more interesting, especially the species that are found in Folkestone. And he worked with a whole number of local ornithologists, and we also created inside the gull is the Seagull Museum, and it is manned or womaned, as it might be, by local ornithologists who preach the seagull gospel. And it turned out that there were actually 18 different species of gulls in Folkestone. We produced a booklet which was written and illustrated by local ornithologists, which was on sale for 50p from the gull unit. And we also had a logbook where people could write down their own seagull experiences. It was so popular that we filled several books. So. And of course the great thing about this work is that it's mobile and it could go to a different location every day and animate different parts of the town. Very different in spirit and look is this work by Sheila Camridge. Maybe some of you have seen her film that she has made recently about the siege in Sarajevo. And Sheila was one of the artists who really spent a lot of time in Folkestone, several weeks on several different visits, and she took photographs of the changing Folkestone. And Folkestone is now in a period of reinventing itself. There's a major cultural regeneration project that is ongoing. So she took images of buildings and sites that were fast disappearing. And we created these posters which we put in sites that are all, every site has a particular historical meaning. This is a bunker on the Road of Remembrance. But Sheila also produced another, there are 8 of these huge posters and 19 of the smaller works, which are each accompanied with a text, and they are almost virally placed in a whole number of places, including the police station, the mosque, a pub, and here in the Salvation Army shop. The work was sold and the money went to the Salvation Army shop. So a work that works very, very closely with the town and the town's many different fortunes. This is probably one of the most written about illustrated works, Tracy Emin's Baby Things, and I think many people who have been skeptical about Tracy's work were much more inclined to look at her more kindly. because it came as such a surprise, maybe after other work that she'd made. Folkestone is very familiar to Tracy, obviously having grown up in nearby Margate, and she was particularly struck by the high levels of teenage pregnancies that you have in Folkestone as well as obviously in Margate. So from that background, she developed the idea of creating 7 bronzes. They are real simulacra of the original and placed in a number of different sites all around Folkestone. There was no, they were really chance encounters, so it made the discovery more of a kind of treasure hunt. Another work that deals very much with Folkestone's history, it's the last one from 2008, is Christian Boltanski's. What you're looking at here is a series of 4 installations along benches that face the coast of France. And this concrete thing here, which looks a bit like a tank trap, actually housed a recording device. And as you sat on the bench, it triggered a voice reading a love letter. And these love letters were all from people who had connections to Folkestone, had lived in Folkestone during, and were either soldiers or connected to the soldiers. We had found the letters. The process was a very interesting one because we first went to the Imperial War Museum, didn't find anything there, then decided we had to work with the town directly. We made an appeal to the whole town to come and meet us in a pub. We worked with the local history society, and we had one talk about Folkestone during the First World War, and I talked about the work of Christian Boltanski, and we made a plea to everybody to bring in their personal letters that they might have at home, and we had an overwhelming response, got many, many letters, all of which were scanned by the History Society. We selected 5. They were often heartbreakingly sad and moving. And we selected 5 very different ones, and it was also important for Christian to work with local people to read them, so not trained actors. And this is Boltanski in the Folkestone small but perfectly formed recording studio. And here, just to give you a sense of how many works, we had 22nd new commissions, and that included performances of film and sound pieces, all spread around the town. So quickly, the next one, 2011. Again, there was a particular inspiration for me to develop the second one, and that is this painting here by somebody called Fredo Franzoni. The painting hangs in the Grand Hotel, and it depicts the arrival of 65,000 Belgian refugees in August 1914 in Folkestone. Obviously fleeing German invasion. And 15,000 of these refugees stayed in Folkestone, and it very much shapes the character of Folkestone today as a first port of call, as a refuge for so many migrants. So the exhibition was called A Million Miles from Home, and it tried to articulate different sides from the first one. Folkestone has a very beautiful church. The church, due to lack of funds, is closed most of the time. It's only open 1 hour a day. And we were given the church to work with, and Hugh Locke made this installation here called For Those in Peril on the Sea, very much a tribute to seafarers, but also to human trafficking, to smuggling, to globalization. It was a hugely popular work. It's still there, but it's just about to leave to go to Miami. The Miami Art Museum will have bought it. So it's great to know that there is a second life for it. But it was hugely popular there, as I said, and people actually asked to be married under the boats and asked to have their children baptized under the boats. So another work here that articulates a side that is so powerful in Folkestone is a work by Paloma Varga-Weiss. And it's, what you're seeing here is the old harbour station. It's the station that was used during the First World War to bring soldiers to be embarked to the battlefields of France. and was then used afterwards for a very different function, i.e. for the Orient Express, the most glamorous of trains coming into one of the most derelict of towns on the coast. But that has stopped too, so it's now this forlorn, very melancholy site. And it's a site that immediately spoke to the artist who made this piece here called Rug People, obviously a reference to refugees, especially she came to Folkestone via Calais and saw the Sangat and the jungle there and was very taken by that. But it's also a nod, of course, to Rode and the birds of Calais. So here a close-up. And equally influenced by that fate of refugees was a young Danish artist called Nikolai Larsen, who made a film which took him to Calais many, many times over the 2 years to gain the trust of the refugees there. And these are just some stills. And we showed, again, the site was vital where we showed this piece, which is all about the hope of these young refugees, often from Iran and Afghanistan, that once they made it to England, they would be safe, and England was the country of their dreams, their promised land, the title of the film. And we used a site that had been derelict for many, many years, had been locked up, was once a cafe, a bar. It had rain coming through when we first got there, and we turned it into a cinema. It was right by the harbour, and also opposite, it turned out, the house where the refugees, mainly from Afghanistan and Iran, were housed in Folkestone. Very different artists from Folkestone themselves, Strange Cargo, who made an amazing project called Everywhere Means Something to Someone. They produced an alternative guidebook. So we had a huge bronze sculpture, but we also had something that is almost invisible. We produced 200 of these small brown plaques. These are all Strange Cargo's special way of working is to work very closely with the community, and they've made an appeal to the community for everybody to bring their stories about the town, about things that you would not normally know unless you live there. So not things that you'd read in any normal guidebook. And so, for example, this plaque is the Gurkhas are stationed in Folkestone, so this is an observation of the Gurkhas. But also, they transformed their gallery into a home, because the title of the exhibition, A Million Years from Home, is all about exile, isolation, and diaspora. But here's the counterpoint to this. Here's a way where visitors could come, have a cup of tea, and have a kind of sense of home. And the special wallpaper all included images that were taken, that were also in the book. The last work is a work by Anne-Catherine Dolben. This is not it. This is obviously it's a small brochure I found that shows the Folkestone that once was. This is the area right by the harbour, which used to have a lido, a fun fair, a boating lake. Here you can see another image of it. It now looks like this. So it's an amazingly emotive site for Folkestone, because it used to be the beating heart of Folkestone, where every family used to go at the weekend. And here's the last slide. This is the work by Anne-Catherine Dolben. She found an untuned bell, a bell that had been expelled from the church for not having the right sound. It wasn't pitch perfect anymore, so it was an exiled bell. It was a bell that even had its voice removed, quite literally as well as metaphorically, because the clapper had been taken out. It's a 16th century tenor bell, and it was given a new life here on this particularly powerful site. And now people can ring the bell. There's a mechanism where you can pull a rope and give this bell a voice again. And I'm delighted to say that this is one of the permanent works there. It's a beautiful piece, and I hope some of you have experienced it or will experience it. So this is really all I want to say, but just as a final summing up, I think all of these works are about what Robert Storr once called aptness when he was speaking about Joshua Whiteread's Holocaust Memorial in Vienna. And it is about this synergy of place and work. And the artists have, I think, in each case, worked incredibly hard to achieve that fusion, and I think this is what makes Folkestone special. Thank you very much.